Who you know and who knows you. It's the heart of any good business networking solution, and it's something we all got to do to grow our business. But if you want to grow, you got to do it right. And tonight is all about networking the right way with the guy that I turn to learn about networking, Lori Rifkin from Lunch with Lori fame and Accounting Solutions of Wisconsin. This show is going to help you be a better networker, and it will help you grow your business. Welcome to Idea Collective Night School. This is a monthly educational opportunity hosted by the Idea Collective community, and it's here to help you become a better business owner. Now, Night School is sponsored by Bank 59, Quick Trip, Serendipity Labs, and the Idea Collective for small business owners. Now, before we start the show, because Lori literally has more content than we have time to share, let's give you a quick outline about what we're going to do. We're going to talk with Lori. He's got an entire presentation and PowerPoint that he's going to share with us. We're going to get your questions in the conversation as well. Just drop them in the chat and we'll include them when we can. And then when we're done, you know what we're going to do? Networking. So we'll have some time to talk with one another, answer some questions about what's going on, and get to know each other a little bit better. So a reminder, everybody's on mute, but if you have a question, put it in the chat and we will work your questions and comments into the conversation. So with that, let's get down to business and let's grow the value of what we do by getting better at networking with Lori Rifkin from Lunch with Lori and Accounting Solutions of Wisconsin. Lori, my friend, it's so great to see you. How you been?
I'm doing great, and it's great to be on the show. You know, Pat, you were one of the rocket ships from one of my networking paths in life, Lunch of Lori. So I really appreciate coming on and giving back to the small business community because I am a small business person. I have 2 micro businesses in a startup phase, so I know what it's like. That's one thing I always tell people. I'm not a coach, but I'm a mentor, and the difference is no man can mentor a woman in childbirth, but a man could coach a woman. I live what I talk because I have to do it myself. It's really true. There's mentors and coaches aren't the same.
I've never, I gotta say, I've heard a lot of stuff. I've never heard it put that way before. So that's unique. That's great. So you've got a presentation for us, and I know we've got a limited amount of time, and you've got a lot of content. So we're very grateful that you're here. We've got our notepads out. Teach us, Lori. The floor is yours. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks. I'm going to share my screen. And again, I might skip through some stuff for time. And if there's more questions in the area, let's dive in. It's a small group. We could have a more dynamic session. So we're going to start. And did it share, Pat? Because I can't see if it's shared.
Yep, looks great. Go for it.
Okay, so a little of my background. I'm an introvert. I never liked networking. I was anti-networking until I was forced to. And once I was forced to network, I had some women mentors who said, if you want to go out and go where you want to go in the world, you're going to have to go out there and meet people and talk to people. And they held me accountable by telling me, we will not help you unless you do that. So that launched me on a networking journey probably 20 years ago now. And ever since then, I've been accumulating what worked, what didn't work, where I was successful, and where I failed. And so we're going to start now going through some of this stuff. One too many. Networking. I have a definition of networking, might be different than other people. Networking is the sale of the most important product in the world, and that's yourself. So whether you're consciously or subconsciously networking, you are always out there in the world presenting yourself in some way, shape, or form, and thus you are always networking. And networks are connections of people and other networks. So the whole world is a network. We might not be connected, everyone, on email or LinkedIn, but as humans, we're all connected and we live on the earth and there's communities. It's all one big connection. What you want to do, though, is learn over time how to activate that. Many people I found, and this was including me, network for the take. When I was out of work, I would network only to find a job. I wanted to take from my network. But the problem is, if you're always taking from your network, you're draining energy and it goes down the drain. And you really shouldn't do that. One of the things I'll teach as we go on, you don't network by the take, you network by the give. Because if everyone took energy out of their network, it would create a big black hole of networking. And that's the reason why you can't network with the take, because if everyone did that, there'd be no energy left, no network. So it's important to always think about what you could give your network, even if you need something from it. The first secret of activating your network is, like I said, giving energy. And the give can be many different ways. If I was unemployed, I could help someone who's less fortunate who's unemployed. I give people a lot of help on networking. I volunteer. I mentor people. Those are all gives. And when you do that, you would say, well, I need to take something now. Well, it doesn't work that way. You have to give first. And giving energy is a form, the analogy I give is charging the battery. You put all this give into your network, it stores the energy. It doesn't go away. We'll get to that in a minute. That's part of the science behind networking. So when you're giving, the networking is building, and networks are stingy. You only want to take out energy when you really need it, because that's critical. Again, remember, if everyone's taking, there's no energy left to give. The second secret of networking is this number E. E is even though it's a letter, is a number. It's the natural compounding number. It's how interest works. It's how the coronavirus, how it took off on that curve. So you can network. And if you consider networking a linear function, it's not going to work. It's not the effort you put out and the return you get. There's a percolation that has to happen. It has to have energy and connections. And when I talk about connections, I have different clubs. I call them the 500, 1,000, 2,000 clubs. That's some of the math behind it. Until you really get to 2,000 connections, it doesn't have to be on LinkedIn. It could be connections in email, it could be on Facebook. But it takes that critical mass for everything to percolate. And 2,000 is what I found is about the right number of connections where things start happening. So going back to that linear view, it isn't a straight line when you network. It isn't. My wife, Michelle, used to say, you go to all these networking events, come back with a stack of business cards, and you have no business. Well, it doesn't work that way. When I originally started, I thought it did work that way, but it really doesn't. And most people think it does work that way because they look at it, I've done all this work, and then they get disappointed because nothing's happening. And that means they haven't understood the mathematics behind it. The math formulas make it impossible to compounding take place for results that happen. Doesn't mean that there's an outlier. Someone goes out and networks tomorrow and lands a big client. I'm talking among a population of people trying to network. Mathematically, it's impossible to get that compounding as the time goes on. And when you want to take energy out of your network, some things happen. You get this critical mass, network is working. Even then, you don't know if the energy is going to come out to you. That's one thing I learned about networking. There's another mathematic part to it. It's asymmetrical. I can help someone for months and months and months and never get any help from them. Or I'm really down and out. I need help right now. And I call it the network God, say no energy is coming out of that right now. But if you put that energy in, I do know that over time, energy is going to come out of that network to somebody. You don't know if that somebody is going to be you, and you don't know when it's going to happen, but it will come back out. So when I talk about the exponential, and this is with coronavirus, an example, there's different stages, like the stages of grief. You start out networking, you're disappointed. Then you say you get discouraged, you get depressed, done, I quit. I quit multiple times networking. Then you finally get that first success, a little more success. And when that networking glob, this congeals and everything comes together, you have the math behind it, the science of energy, it really takes off. But that's why I said it takes thousands of connections and probably like a year of time before the first results will happen. And you really can't rush that.
Lori, can I jump in with a question real quick?
Sure.
When you talk about investing energy into your network, can you use an example or two of the types of inputs that add energy to the network as opposed to taking it out?
Sure. Volunteering, helping someone else, commenting on someone's post, sharing someone's post on LinkedIn, coming to someone's event to show support. It could be writing a recommendation for somebody. Those are all examples of gives.
Good. Good. And then what about taking out? Are those referrals or are those asking someone to buy a ticket? Talk about what that is.
It could be, the two top ones, I want a job and I want a sale.
Hmm. Got
And
it.
other people, could be a take, I want you to come to my event.
Hmm.
I want you to support me. I want you to make a comment on something I post. But the two biggest ones are jobs and the sale on takes.
Great input. Thank you for that. And that one of those was Susie's question. Thank you, Susie, for dropping it in the chat. If you have questions, drop in the chat. We'll jump into. All right, Lori, go
Yeah,
ahead, man.
that's
Thank
okay.
you.
Ask questions as we go because I have a lot of material.
Yep.
I'll fly through some. You say slow down or go back, just tell me.
Got it.
I call this the network gods. There is a spiritual God factor of networking. You have to be in the right mindset because you'll reach points where you see this sign in front of you, try again or give up. I was telling Pat before we started this, I was going to have a networking boot camp. I did it too premature. I didn't do enough marketing efforts. No one signed up. I failed on that first endeavor, but I'm not going to give up. I'll try again 20 different ways. I know in the end it will work. But a lot of times you're going to fail when you do things in networking. That doesn't mean you're not successful. Actually, I would contend unless you're failing in the process of networking, you cannot be successful. So there's something I developed. Almost everyone, if I would ask everyone, has a pitch, but that's not enough. I've learned you need networking personas. And the difference is you still need a pitch, but you have to have a give with a differentiator on top of that. So example, when I give my definition of a mentor and coach, people remember that. It's different. I'm always volunteering, always doing presentations. That's part of my give. All that together is what my networking persona is. And because I own multiple businesses, I need multiple networking personas. What works in the small business community does not work in my turnaround community. They're nothing like the same. And so when you go out networking, you have to think of who's the audience and have a different networking persona for each of those. So one of the things I challenge everyone on the call is think of things or take a piece of paper and write down what can you give to your network, because that is important to know your gives before you go to a networking event or you network. And again, it's a wide definition. So I would tell people, encourage them, write down and know your gives. And the second part is what makes you different. Everyone's different, because if you say you're not different, I'm going to tell you that you do have a difference. That's not to be different. So everyone has some difference. Everyone has something special about them. I learned that in Lunch of Lori events. The questions I ask, almost everyone universally answers them, and together their answers is their difference in the world. So everybody does have a difference. It could be a hobby. It doesn't have to necessarily be a business. It could be where you volunteer. It could be where you're from in the world. It could be how you communicate with people. But everyone has a difference, and you should use it. So people remember, it's one thing to go out and network. It's another thing for people to remember you a year or 2 years later. So you have a networking persona, you know all the stuff about you, what your give is, what your pitch, how you're different, but now you need a networking marketing plan, because your networking persona requires marketing to find your audience. And it's not easy. Most people don't write a networking marketing plan. I have one because I'm in different businesses and each business is different. And it's not something that you do lightly. It takes some trial and error, but I would encourage you, if you really are a hardcore network and want to build a big network, you have a network marketing plan. And that plan has to include at a minimum who your target audience is, how you're going to reach them, your metrics of success, and an ongoing maintenance plan part. Because I learned this the hard way. When I finally decided to have a network, I started meeting all these people, but I didn't have a maintenance plan. And when you don't have a maintenance plan, people drop off the horizon. The biggest class of people who refuse to do a maintenance plan is somebody who's looked for a job and landed a job. They go, high five, I got a job. And almost overwhelmingly, they stop networking to the same degree they networked before they found that job. And I've heard from many of those people and say, COVID cost me my job. So now I have to look again. And I let my network die. And now I have to go start it from scratch. So I would say you never let your network die. You always got to maintain it to some level after you get what you want. I'm going to talk about LinkedIn a little bit. LinkedIn is crucial to connecting with people, but you have to use LinkedIn to drive engagement to build relationships. Because I'll mention this in a bit, a connection is not a relationship. Relationships are what drive actions, not pure connections. And one of the ways of building a big network on LinkedIn is to like and comment, and I'll call it mine the second and third connections. If someone mentions me in a post and there's 30 people like that post, I reach out to all 30 people and say, hey, I like to connect with you. Thanks for liking the post I'm in. And I tell them a little bit about myself. That's a way of supercharging your network and getting a lot of connections. It's a in between a cold call and a warm call. You're mentioned, and almost universally, 70 to 90% of the people will accept that. I look at, this is what I'll call the part of the maintenance. It's like being a farmer. You have to cultivate, weed, and water your network. And you have to do that all the time. It's nonstop. So you're always sending a note to your connections, congratulating people on an anniversary or an award or something, helping others in worse shape than you, volunteering in groups. Volunteering is one of the best ways. If I was unemployed, one of the best ways to get a job, in my opinion, is to be a volunteer in different groups. You're going to meet a lot of people on boards and stuff. It's a great way of meeting people. So I want to talk about engagement and relationships a little bit more. Like I said, connecting is not a relationship, and it involves engagement. So if I go on LinkedIn to look at something, I'm always at the same time going to send out little blurbs to people in a message. How are you doing? I have an event coming up. We should talk. Because if I do that for 10 people every day, that's a lot of messages over a year's time. So I'm constantly doing that. And if I do a post, I encourage and drive engagement by responding to people out there. So it's important not just to post content, you need to be messaging and responding to people's posts and doing stuff. And it is a lot of work. It's not easy. But if you really want to build a network, I'm talking 5,000, 10,000 connections, you're going to have to do work like that.
So, Lori, jumping in
Yes.
with two questions real quick. One question Jennifer's asking about standard outreach templates for second and third connections. Or are you writing custom things every time?
I have a standard, but I always try to customize the first line so you don't think it's a machine sending it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I'll something about the person I'll put in the first line, and then the rest of it's pasted underneath there.
Okay. What about keeping track of all of these engagements? Are you using LinkedIn Sales Navigator, or how do you keep track of who you've talked to and who you haven't?
I don't, and that's one of the failures. I made a decision for the breadth of communications and a wide network versus tracking. I could do this on a limited scale and track everything. I have not done it that way because of the businesses I'm in. I want to sell courses and stuff. I need a very wide and broad network, and I need to build it fast. So I gave up direct tracking. Now I backfill, because what you don't see on LinkedIn is I have a 5,000 person mailing list I've been cleaning up, and my goal is to always have 4,000 clean names plus. So there's a backside of this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also using LinkedIn when I check and see if I have someone's current company. At the same time I'm checking that, I send them a note. So I am always trying to keep my data clean going forward and send a note at the same time.
Okay, couple more quick ones.
Sure.
Follow up from Susan. How do you find people to re-chat with?
I am mining the I'm mining the connections of mind connections.
Mining the connection of mind connections.
My
So
connections.
your connection. So you're looking for reasons to connect with them?
I'll say we were both in this group. You should come to a lunch or Lori event.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there's someone I want to have one-on-one, I'll say you should come to a lunch or Lori event. Then afterward, we can have a one-on-one after we know about each other. So I'm always doing that. And that really has expanded my network. When COVID started, I think I had 2,000 connections. I'm closing in on 6,000 now, a year later from doing that.
Okay. One more quick one from Susie here. If you're in for the long game of networking, would you recommend spending the same amount of time at the beginning that you do halfway through and at the end? Do you ever let up, or is it always the same?
Based on the law of compounding, you have to put it in the front end. You can't get compounding unless it's in the front.
Great. And great.
There's diminishing returns on the back.
Okay. And great questions, everyone. Thanks. Keep them coming. All right, Lori, thanks. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted
No,
to make
no,
sure we're getting this
this is
information.
better. It's better to have questions because the questions help me make presentations better.
Sure.
Since it's a small group, keep them up. So here's another thing. Do you want to wear the crown? Because content is king. And there's only two ways to get content. Take someone else's and reshare it, or create your own. And again, content is king for many reasons. One of them is it drives relationships. It drives, there's another benefit of networking. Establishing yourself as a subject matter expert. If you would have asked my peers 2 years ago, would I be a networking expert? The answer would have been no. But I figured out how to write content, hold events, and learn stuff, trial and error. And so when you do content, you can establish yourself as a subject matter expert. And so it's important. And if you have nothing to post about, you're invisible. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Why do people want to come and look at your post or do anything if you have nothing to share? You got to think about that. People say, well, I don't know how to write content. Just like people say they're not different, everybody is different to a degree. I can't tell you in the beginning of COVID how many people were out of work. I'm going to give an example. Supply chain people, I made a ton of them are out of work due to COVID. I said, you should write articles and start establishing yourself as an expert about supply chain, how we might have to bring it back to the United States, how disruptions could be handled. And if you look now, there's shortages of all kinds of commodities because of supply chain disruptions. If that person who was a supply chain person was out of work in the beginning of COVID, started writing articles about that, they'd be hired today. So almost anyone could be some kind of subject matter expert. And a lot of times my wife would say, well, how does a blue collar worker do that? Well, you know how to fix things. You know how to read blueprints. Everyone could be a subject matter expert to some degree. And now I go into something else, and again, I didn't start networking with any of these ideas in my head. I realized them as I went. Without content, you can't create a brand. And if you want to have a brand, you're going to have content. Because when you want to create a brand, it's a long haul. As Pat, you created a brand. You're driving down this road to create a brand. You got to have content along the way to keep people engaged. So it goes hand in hand. If you're going to have a brand, you're going to have some kind of content. Which brings up the other thing. This is a question I ask people who want to network. Do you want to be a commodity or be a brand? Because some people don't understand. If you're a commodity, you're a dime a dozen. I fix one of my businesses, Clarity Management, fixes broken companies. And the largest share of those companies that are broken had a chance to have some proprietary component at one time and wouldn't do it, because a lot of times to develop a brand or proprietary component in the commodity business, you got to cannibalize your own sales. And it's very difficult for a business owner to say they're going to drive their sales down $2 million this year to get $5 million down the road. So you have to decide if you're going to be a commodity or a brand. When you make that switch, it's a lot of work. Personally, I had to put effort into Lunch with Lori and my accounting solutions and take time away from my core brand Clarity. That cost me money. That's a business decision. I decided that the ROI of the future of new brands was more than the short-term loss. So I decided to brand myself as a networking expert at the price of losing some core business. That's what I call cannibalization. And that is something that if you're a commodity, you should always consider how you can turn yourself into a brand. And I always ask myself, what is my brand? What is your brand if you want to have one? And my brand is to say what's on my mind and then roll up my sleeves and help people and not be afraid to take some risk. I had a example of a risk the other day. I got a call from a young lady who was in a technical accounting program. She was doing a survey of bookkeepers. She did this whole survey of me, asked me all these questions. I said, half the answers to these questions were on my LinkedIn profile. She goes, well, I don't have LinkedIn. I said, time out. You're an accounting major going in the business world, and you don't have LinkedIn? I go, that's just not right. You need to have a LinkedIn profile. And she goes, well, no one's ever told me that. Well, I took the risk telling her. And the funny thing was, I said, most people won't follow through what I tell them because it was unsolicited advice. So Pat's been a recipient of that. But the next day she had a LinkedIn profile and I was her first connection. She's coming to a Lunch with Lori event and she's on her way. And none of her professors, none of the other people on the survey, no one else was willing to tell her that. They were just going to let her go on her own and she wouldn't be successful where she wanted to go. But it was a risk telling her because she could have told me, as Pat did on the 15th hole, shut up and get out of the cart.
True story.
It is a true story. So, and this brings up the one of the things from Pat. Pat gave me Lunch with Lori. But remember, Pat, you said I had to use it. And it's easy to be given things. We're in a society where we give everything to everyone right now. That doesn't mean people are going to use what they're given. An example on stimulus checks. As soon as those checks came, the business in Las Vegas increased. Those checks could have been used to do productive things. They were just wasted. It was like a gift. Well, when Pat gave me the Lunch with Lori idea, I had to go get a logo, build programs, talk to people. It was a ton of work. The easiest part was getting the hashtag. The hardest part was using it. And so if you are going to have a brand, realize you're in for a long haul. It's a lot of work, but there's a lot of benefits of it. Right before COVID hit, if I would go to a meeting and say my first name, they say you're the Lunch with Lori person. And even now, I'm networking a lot across the country. People now recognize the brand. The logo has a distinctive look. It's something, again, the differentiator, your networking persona. I couldn't have a networking persona without a hashtag or a logo that everyone would recognize. So that's critical. And the other thing is your brand give energy to your network. When I think about it, when I have Lunch with Lori events, people leave with 20 connections. It's all about energy. People for the first time get to share part of their life story. It's about giving energy. If you look at successful brands, they always convey something of giving energy, a positive impact. So if you're going to have a brand, make sure when you're networking that your brand conveys that it's helping people and has a give to it. So I ask everyone, if you want to have a brand, one of the exercises you should do is write down what your brand is going to be. Think of logos, think of ways you're going to market it. Don't wait. If you really want to do it, you just got to jump in, and you'll have failures and successes along the way. But one thing I'm learning more and more, if you don't start, it will never happen. Which brings us a little sidebar. I had to think about this. I have a son who's a social worker, and he gave me a book called Awakening. It's by Mark Nepo. Every chapter is a day in the year. And one of the things really made me think, the chapter wasn't about it, but it provoked this thought. Do you want to regret what you've done in life or regret what you never did? And so I'm working on a book. I didn't want to have a book. I wanted to have an online course first, but I realized I would regret if I didn't have a book with everything. So I'm working on the start of a book now. I don't want to regret what I didn't do. If all my new businesses fail, all I did was lose money. But if I died, I know I died trying what my dreams were. And so everyone needs to think about that. What do you want to regret in life? And if you want to regret what you didn't do, then just go start doing something. So this is sort of out of place, but it's important. We're in an age where pictures and video do sell and do work. So when we go back to in-person networking, use the camera on your phone, take pictures, post people's pictures. People love that. Use it. It's there for a purpose. So this is something else I learned. It goes back of all that follow-through messaging and all the comments on LinkedIn. You have to give recognition to follow up with your network to have it activated. And if I meet somebody, because I do have templates, I have a thank you script ready to go immediately. I have a one-on-one meeting system that I use. And if you do that right away, people usually respond. Today, I had a meeting with a gentleman who owns a financing company. And I said at the end of the meeting, I'm going to send you an invite for the end of June. It's going to be called a placeholder. And all that is a reminder that we have to meet again. Because when I establish the people I have one-on-one meetings with, I really want to keep up, I try to get them on a quarterly schedule. And the easiest way is today, We left that meeting. He had an invite for a June meeting to decide what day we're going to do by the time he got back to his car. So it is critical if you want to have a network and keep it engaged, you have to meet people all the time and follow through. I have a KPI of networking success. And to me, it's the number of one-on-one meetings you generate. When you get down to it, one-on-one meetings with someone is where business happens. And I find it in some of my businesses, it could take 4 to 8 one-on-one meetings before I'll ever see any business from somebody. In my Clarity turnaround business, between first meeting someone and getting even the ability to quote is 24 to 36 months. If you ask bankers how long it takes to change a customer, it could be 3 to 5 years. So you really need to keep those one-on-one meetings going because that's what keeps you front and center. And it's a lot different sending a message to somebody on LinkedIn, which takes 10 seconds to read, versus having somebody in front of you for an hour. It really is a way more impactful networking engagement to meet someone in purpose or on Zoom right now for an hour or so. And you don't have to talk all about business. That is the other part of this. I rarely talk about business at one-on-one meetings, especially the first couple ones. Any questions?
Yeah, JB, you asked a question about the one-on-one system. Did that give you the answer you were looking for?
Yeah.
Or do you want some clarity? Is there something about it that you want to know more about? Because it's really intriguing.
No, I think it was an earlier part where he had talked about, I think it was like in response to messages.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm going to just keep listening.
Okay. If you need more clarity, jump in. Any other questions at this time? We're going fast. Okay,
I'm
this is
going
good
fast
stuff.
'cause
It's good. It's good.
I
Go
made
for
a
it, Lori.
decision, try to cover everything, and I'd rather go fast and stop, because even if you just get one idea from a slide, that's all that matters.
It's
So
great. Thanks, Lori. Go ahead.
One-on-one meeting tips. Like I mentioned, I really talk about me at a one-on-one meeting, but I could tell you after my first one-on-one meeting, I know where that person takes a vacation. I know how many kids they have. I know what their kids' favorite activities are. I know if a person's spouse is like them or an opposite. That first one-on-one meeting, all I care about is the person I'm meeting. I'm not there to sell them. I'm not there to get anything. And that's part of my brand. That's the give. I'm giving them the opportunity to talk about themselves for once versus people bombarding them with trying to sell them something or get something from them. So that's one of my gives and my brand differentiators. Through those questions, I always find common ground. And that was one of the ideas for the Lunch with Lori questions. We've been to a Lunch with Lori, is when I started asking all these questions, I realized you always can find common ground with somebody. And once you find common ground, that leads to the start of a relationship. That is one of the keys to having a relationship with somebody, is to have common ground. And sometimes you have to work hard in getting that. I'll briefly might mention that in the next meeting, we'll talk about more about what I want, what I'm looking for. But if they do ask me what I want, I do what I call the soft take. I'll say, I like to find some customers in this revenue range. If you know anybody, let me know, but we could talk more about that the next time we meet. And one other thing I do at the end of one-on-one meetings, I ask for a grade. Because I network differently and some people don't like it. And so I asked, what did you like about this meeting or you didn't like? And the biggest dislike is that I don't talk about business right away. I've had some people from Lunch with Lori on my pure business network who get mad because they can't do their elevator pitch. They want to go right to the sale. And that's not what it's about. And I get some good feedback when I ask, what do you like about this meeting? What do you don't like? I also ask, what would you want me to change about this? What else did you want me to do? Those two questions are exceedingly important if you're networking to find a job. Because here's one of my things I've learned, and I've had to look for a job multiple times. Do you want to send 1,000 resumes out to the black hole of the resume bank where you get no feedback? Or would you rather meet 50 people one-on-one, and at the end of the meeting, can you give me feedback? So asking questions at the end of a networking meeting, especially if you're looking for a job, is the only opportunity you will have looking for a job to get some feedback in real time. Because when you send a resume out, you're never going to get any feedback.
So, Lori, jumping in with a question, you find all of this great information that really understands who the person is and what makes them tick. How do you keep track of all that information so you can refer back to it in the future?
I don't. I have to do it on the fly. And that is, remember I said, I'm 64. I need 10,000 connections to do some of the businesses I want. I am going to, something gives. I'm a personality type that needs all those details like that. But if I focus on all those details, being a perfectionist, checking every box, I would never have a network. When I threw out tracking everything, my network grew. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but if I meet people 3 or 4 times a year, I don't forget some of the core stuff. But today I met with a gentleman and he reminded me, I did not remember, he was my second network meeting when I moved to Milwaukee. I didn't remember that. No, if I had a CRM, I would have had that note in there, but I didn't remember that. And yes, that's maybe not good. I have a different goal. I need a very wide, large network, and I give up some of the details.
Got it. Thank you.
So really the decision to network is yours. It's a choice. I mean, if you're not going to network to grow your business, I remember I said networking is sales. What are you going to do? What's the alternatives to networking? Because I like to know what they are, because I didn't network for years and I stagnated. When I network, doors open. So I don't know what the alternative is if you want to go somewhere to not to network. So I created this Lunch with Lori event, and it really is a safe way to network. I've had tons of introverts who really enjoyed it because everyone, I call it the equal opportunity of networking. Every single person has to participate and every single person has to answer the same questions. And that makes nobody better than anyone else. And it's amazing. I'm convinced a lot of the answers I get in a Lunch with Lori are answers that sometimes a spouse wouldn't even know. And so I do it. I have an event May 19th. The May 4th one just sold out today. May 19th, anyone who hasn't been to a Lunch with Lori, come. It's a fun way to network. And I just got an email from someone who's looking to do business with somebody from the last Lunch with Lori they met there. I've had people gotten board positions, people stay in contact, people got friends. I have a guy I'm going to go fishing with because he wants to go fishing. I invited him over for the last Lunch with Lori. So I put that up there. If anyone wants to come May 19th, you're all invited. And visit lunchwithlori.com to learn about upcoming networking course and boot camps and other events. Because I'm putting the finishing touches. I have a whole course of how to network. John Taylor in town put it together. It's very comprehensive. And the reason I'm working on a book is because I had 140 pages of networking material that I couldn't incorporate all that in the course. And I didn't want to waste it. Whether someone buys it or not today, it's valuable stuff. In fact, I went to UWM and said they should have a course on networking because I can't find a college that has a full semester course on networking. And after paying over $500,000 for 4 kids to go to college, I would say I would have gladly paid more to teach them networking, because I watched my younger son, Chase, who came networking with me in Milwaukee from 19 years old, how he's already gotten 2 jobs, how he's introduced me to people. He did a post of getting a job, the kid gets 17,000 views. I have interns from UWM now, they don't teach them any of that stuff. I think that's one of the best gifts you could give someone in college, is teaching them the art of networking. They'll be able to use that their whole life, no matter what they're in. And that's it.
That's a ton of information, Lori. Thank you so much for sharing so much. And if you hit escape and stop sharing your screen, that way we can go back and see everyone. We have a small enough group, we can kind of lead a discussion here. So here's what I'd like to do. I want to ask a few questions, and then let's just take your microphone off mute and just share your comments, because I want this to be a part of the conversation for people that see this in the future, because I think it could be helpful. So of the stuff that Lori shared, is this something that he shared that you're like, yes, I think that's gospel. I absolutely agree with that. Anything that was on the slides that really jumped out to you that you thought was an absolute home run?
Give versus take. that was being a longtime salesperson. That was one of the very first lessons that I learned about successful networking, because like Lori was mentioning, it might be for what are the top two to look for a job or to get a sale. And it's, it wasn't trying to do anything wrong. We're like, okay, well, I'm here. Who could I sell to? But once you switch that and say, how can I serve? Then it just changes the whole dialogue. It changes your approach and the relationships you have.
For sure. For sure. JB, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was going to say the compounding effect of networking, definitely. And the visual that went with that, I think was really useful.
Yeah, the fact that it was nonlinear was pretty interesting to me. And it's not just collecting names, right, Lori? It's keeping them engaged. So yeah, you might have 500,000, 2,000, but as you're working them all throughout the process, that's when the scaling effect happens.
It is. Well, it takes the actual science is the conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. So that's why if you take energy out of your network, it's just transferred to you personally, and your network has no energy. So your energy, it's that energy with the number of connections that compounds, and that's where you get the explosion of results. You need both. You need the energy plus the compounding of connections.
Yeah.
Along the time axis.
Yeah, that's good. Anything else that jumped out that you're like, yes, that point that he made is something I'm really agreeing with or really hit home? Angela, go ahead.
I would just say, if like branding yourself, it kind of happened to me on accident, but ever since I've labeled myself the lighting lady, it seems to make it extremely easy for people to remember me. And they'll remember that before they'll remember Angela or where I work. They'll remember me as the lighting lady. So if you can come up with something like that, the idea coach, I don't even know why I'm saying this, but it really has been a game changer for me. So that it reinforced that, and it made me thankful. And just FYI, just a quick story on how that happened. I met somebody at a trade show and she lost my card, and she searched the internet and Facebook for the lighting lady. And when she told me the story, I'm like, oh my gosh, the lighting lady, I love that. Can I use that? That's just awesome.
Is there a really cool name that
found it.
Pat Miller didn't give somebody?
Yeah,
Yes,
no, I didn't
it was an accident.
I didn't give that one. No, I did not. I wish I would have, because it's perfect. All right. So what did Lori share that surprised you? Is there anything that like, oh, that I didn't expect to hear that, or something that jumped out? Susie, go ahead.
I think just the fact that you put numbers and science with all of this stuff was like blew my mind. I thought it was all about relationships, but analyzing it, I guess, is just taking it a different level. So I appreciate your perspective on it.
Yeah, thanks. And it's interesting because people don't know I have a high advanced calculus and science background, biochemistry, organic chemistry. And I was thinking one day, this is math and science. It's never talked about that, but it really is math and science. And it explained why people quit. They didn't give the compounding time to take effect. They were doing nothing wrong. They just quit too early because they didn't let that time percolate. And it is critical to appreciate that, because it does put things in perspective. You can't rush it. I'm not saying you can't be successful without respecting it, because there's always a bell-shaped curve. But for the average person, it takes a long time to build a network, and they're not doing anything wrong.
That's really good. Other things that he said that surprised you? Anything else that was like, oh, I never really thought about it that way, or something that he shared that stood out? How about this? What's something that he shared that you're going to act on? Go ahead, Angela.
Actually putting together like an intentional networking plan and thinking through the pieces of that. And instead of just kind of what's coming up on my calendar, be a little bit more intentional.
Got it. Jennifer, you actually used the raise your hand button. I'm impressed. Sorry, I didn't see you there. What do you got to contribute?
All right. Well, I think this was great. And the logo, the Lunchwood logo, Lori jumped out to me with my Champions Club, like, oh, I have a great opportunity to do something there. So that was definitely one call to action that I'm going to take out of the conversation.
No, I think that's really good. The energy in, energy out premise, Lori, is really, really cool. And the idea of acting on that is How would you go about, I mean, maybe you might know someone that has a lot of events for people. How would you go about sharing those events without taking energy out of the network at the same time?
You have to put it's like paying dues or learning something, becoming an expert. You have to put your time of giving in first.
Mhm.
I could not ask people to come to a lunch with Lori if I had not gone through all the previous stuff and failure, success on networking.
Yep.
It would be, who are you? And I have to say this with no malice or ill intent. The small business community embraces networking 100% different. And Lynn's in the TMA. If I go to Turnaround Management Association, they make fun of Lunch of Lori. It is a waste of time for them. Business people don't appreciate that. I had a gentleman who was an ex-Xerox salesman, Sandler trained, the best of the best when Xerox, an older gentleman. I met him networking in Florida. He wanted to give me his pitch right away and sell me. And I said, stop, you can't do that. I want to learn about you. It was so funny, he became a friend. He wrote an article for the Miami, for the Miami Business Journal, how I changed his mind on networking, because he went right to the sale. And in some of those bigger business groups, they go right to the sale, right to business. They don't get to know you. And I've been fighting that little by little, where now some of those people have come to Lunch with Lori and they recommend it. But in a small business community, it's 100% polar opposite of the big business community. They don't look at networking the same way.
Yeah. No, that's very true. All right. Well, we're almost out of time. Any final comments or thoughts or questions that you might have for Lori before we wrap up this portion?
I really like the idea about branding yourself, right? Like I use a hashtag engaging geek. That is what I believe I embrace. But now you got me thinking a little bit more about how can I make that brand shine a little bit, even within my own business. So that was fun to, it's almost like that idea of, do we do an idea slam on it? Do we get, you got to get those creative juices going and let go a little bit and go let the ideas flow. So it was fun to create that.
I'm with you, JB. I was thinking about that too. Like, what is my personal brand? Because it's like, oh, well, what do you stand for? Well, I sell stock. Gosh, yeah. So I'm excited to get to work.
Yeah. No, that's great.
One thought I had on that too was I've been reading the book that we've been doing, Fascinate, that's in the book club for the Idea Collective. And I find the same thing. Like, it's really easy for me when I'm reading it to think about all my clients and what one they are, but it's a lot harder about thinking about myself. So I think that introspection is sometimes so much harder to look at our own self through the same lens that other people see us.
And that's because of all the stories you tell yourself about yourself. You are not looking at yourself objectively. You have years and years and years of that voice in your head that's ruining your clear perspective on who you are and what you do. For anyone that's considering doing this, I would not encourage you to give yourself a nickname based on what you want people to believe. I would encourage you to give yourself a nickname based on why you get out of bed in the morning. That's what you need to run for office on. You need to make sure that it's what you live and what you love. And if that's what it is, then you can find a personal brand that works. Eva, Barbara, we've been talking. You raised your hand so politely. What did you have to add?
With all your experience, Lori, because in my case, I started networking with Zoom. So now as I start doing, now everything starts opening up. What would be the recommendation? What are the main difference that you will see?
I don't see any difference. That's the thing. People say it's different. I don't see a difference, because the hard part of networking is the follow through. Whether you meet someone in Zoom or go to an event and meet somebody, remember, that's just a connection. It's the hard work of building that relationship that you got to do that one-on-one. So I don't see a big difference. And that's something that's kind of very interesting, because people talk it's so different. Zoom has been a godsend for me to expand my network all across the United States and internationally. That's going to go away if we go back 100% in person. I hope we never go back 100% in person. That would be the worst thing for networking.
Who are you?
Because of the time. Well, it's for me, I find it very convenient because of time.
You're exactly right.
I mean, it helps a lot doing it. I can have many in a week, versus in time, it just reduces in half or less.
Last week, I drove 45 minutes to meet somebody for 45 minutes. And by the time I came back, it was over almost 2.5 hours to meet with one person. And Eva Barber, you're absolutely right. I don't think this efficiency is ever going to be undone entirely.
Yeah. And JB, you were talking about Lori and how well he's doing online.
Lori, a year ago, you would have never said the words you just said.
I know that, but that's one of the things. You're always, you fail, you learn. It's just an evolving thing. Again, I play in a lot more different worlds than most people. I play in the big business world, the mid, the small. I have different companies do different things. That's why I have to have separate networking personas. They don't all work in the same market. In fact, if I go to a pure high level business thing, here's my brand there. I tell owners what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, then roll up my sleeves and sit next to them and get shit done. You don't know what I do for a living. That's something else. When you have a brand, always leave it to people have to ask questions, because if I told them exactly what I did, I turn around companies, they go, oh, I know about that. But the way I just described it, they don't know what I do. Or I'll use, I'm a chief profitability officer. Does your company have one? Nobody has a chief profitability officer. So if you're going to create a brand, don't do it from your perspective. Do it with this first. What questions is it going to provoke from the other side? Because when those questions happen, that's the start of your relationship.
Good stuff. Good stuff. It's been a terrific conversation, Lori. Thank you so much for giving us as much as you did. If you want to contact Lori, please put your contact information in the chat, including the link to the upcoming Lunch with Lori event. We'd appreciate it. Night School here is our chance to learn from people as gifted as Lori about topics that we all need to know. Next month, on May 25th, Ann Knutson with Bank 59, who's also a professor, is going to teach us about negotiation tips for small business owners. So she is literally a professor on negotiation. She's going to help us get our unfair share of the negotiations that we get into. And she's really sharp. So next month in this space, we'll learn all about negotiating tips for all of us so we can make some more money. A big thanks to Lori Rifkin from Lunch with Lori for sharing so much tonight. And thanks to everybody else that's come. And always look for Night School recordings to be up inside the vault. The show, of course, presented by Bank 59, Quick Trip, Serendipity Labs, and all of you from the Idea Collective for Small Business Owners. I'm Pat Miller, the Idea Coach. Thanks for coming tonight.